Are you feeling lost in a sea of information? Let me guess. You have Googled your research topic about 37 times, opening 50 tabs, and now your brain feels like in a big puzzle. You have found a topic, you have searched a dozen keywords, but the result feels scattered, messy, or too broad to make sense. If you nodded yes, you are not doing anything wrong. You're exactly where many new researchers begin. Hi, I'm Kiran, and in this episode, I'm going to walk you through how to use a scoping review to solve that big puzzle. Scoping review is one of the most flexible type of literature review. Let's put it simply, a scoping review is like spreading out all the puzzle pieces before you start putting the puzzle together. It helps you explore what's been written, what angles have been studied, and most importantly, what has not been researched yet. It is mostly used in the exploratory research. According to Agse and O'Malley, a scoping review is a type of knowledge synthesis that maps the key concept, types of evidence, and research gaps in a field by systematically searching, selecting, and synthesizing existing literature. In short, it's a big picture review, not to answer a question, but to figure out how to ask a better one. Alright, now let's talk about why we actually do a scoping review. Because here is the truth, a scoping review is not busy work, it's not just another academic chore. It helps you in mapping your research landscape. What has been studied so far about a particular research problem, what type of sample has been studied, and how often has this topic been explored. It gives you bird's eye view of the entire field before you build your own research on it. Next, it helps you identify what is trending and what is traditional. Like what theories keep coming up in this field? Are most studies using surveys, interviews, or experimental methods? Where are they being published? Local journals or global databases or grey literature like NGO reports? It's like being a detective. You are spotting patterns in language, in frameworks, and in how people are asking their questions. Okay, this one is my favorite, and probably yours too. Because every good thesis, dissertation, or paper starts by answering this. What is missing? Your research gap. A scoping review lets you see the blind spots, those areas nobody has explored deeply enough, and that's where your research gets to step in and shine. Fourth aim is to clarify definitions or boundaries of the field, especially in new or mixed up fields. People use different words to describe the same thing or the same word to mean totally different things. So your job is to clean that up. Do researchers mean the same thing when they say well-being? Is digital learning the same as e-learning or hybrid pedagogy? A scoping review helps bring clarity. So when you write your question, it's grounded, not floating. And finally, the most powerful aim, a scoping review doesn't just answer research questions, it creates better ones. You will finish your review not just with a long list of studies, but with a much sharper sense of what matters, what is possible, and what you are excited to explore next. That's when your real research journey begins. So if you're wondering why go through all this effort just to review literature, now you know. Scoping review maps your field, shows you the key players and patterns, key concepts, reveals the blind spots, sharpens your concepts understanding, and helps you ask smarter, stronger questions. Honestly, it's not just a review, it's your research strategy session. Let's take an example. Suppose you're interested in mental health mobile apps used by Indian college students. You're not trying to prove whether these apps work or not. You just want to explore what has already been studied, who has been studied, what theories, methods, and tools were used. This is where a scoping review becomes your best friend. What do we need first? We need a broad research question. What is known about the design, use, and cultural adaptation of mental health apps among Indian college students? Then we will start searching multiple databases smartly, as we have already learned how to use Boolean operators in our previous video. So use Google Scholar, Scopus, PubMed, JSTOR, WHO reports, Indian government reports, or local NGO reports. This gives you relevant diverse sources without drowning. Step 3 is setting a clear exclusion and inclusion criteria. Now, some of you might be thinking, shouldn't we define our inclusion and exclusion criteria before we start searching? Shouldn't that be step 2? That's a really smart question, and I love that you're thinking critically. So here is the answer. In scoping reviews, the process is iterative, which means it's not completely locked in from the beginning. You explore, reflect, refine, and that's not only allowed, it's expected. We will start with searching multiple databases because at this stage we are casting a wide net. We are searching what kinds of studies, topics, methods, and sources exist out there. Then comes to applying inclusion and exclusion criteria. Once we know what is out there, we sharpen our focus. Now we begin to filter which studies match our population or topic, which ones are outdated, irrelevant, or off track, which ones we might want to come back to later. So even though the two steps feel like they could be flipped in a scoping review, we always begin with exploration. Then we apply structure. Think of it like going to a bookstore. First you browse the whole store to see what is available. That is step 2. Then you shortlist what you actually want to read. That is step 3. And remember, this process isn't fixed in stone. You might adjust your search terms after you start filtering. That's the beauty of a scoping review. It grows with your understanding. Step 4 is making a table, the one with all the studies you included in your scoping review. But don't stop there, because this table is not just a summary, it's your research map. And if you read it carefully, it will quietly tell you where to go next in your study. Let me show you how. Where is the research clustered? First, look for crowded corners. Are most studies from metro cities? Are they all published between the same few years? Do they all use surveys and skip interviews or long-term observations? This helps you ask, is this topic being studied from just one angle? Are we hearing only one kind of voice and missing others? For example, if 15 out of 22 studies are based in Delhi or Mumbai, then the research is clustered around urban students, and that's useful to know. What populations are missing? Now scan your population column, your sample. Ask yourself, are there any rural participants? What about non-English speakers or gender diverse group or first generation college students? This will tell you which sample is consistently missing from the studies, and that is your cue. Maybe you want to focus on rural mental health app users, or maybe on students from marginalized communities who face digital exclusion. These underrepresented groups are not just gaps, they are opportunities for your thesis to make a real contribution. Finally, look at the outcome or findings column. Are all the studies only taking about downloads but never about continued app use? Do they track stress reduction but not user satisfaction? Are they missing how cultural stigma affects app engagement? This shows a conceptual gap. It knows about who was studied but what questions were never asked. And exactly here, your research question is hiding. So your table isn't just a record, it's a thinking tool. It tells you what has been said, what keeps getting repeated, and what has been left in the shadows. Now that you have collected and charted all your studies, here comes the best part, making sense of it all. Most people think this step has to be thematic, like creating rigid categories, but that's not always necessary. Especially in scoping review, you can write it narratively, descriptively, or thematically, or a mix of all three. Let's stick with our example on mental health apps for Indian college students. Most studies, let's say n is equal to 37, were published between 2015 and 2024, focusing on urban university students. A significant number of studies used quantitative survey methods, while only a few employed qualitative approach. Only 6 studies mentioned regional language support and none addressed stigma attached to mental health issues. Theoretical frameworks varied widely and many studies lacked cultural adaptation or inclusion of non-English speaking population. This is descriptive synthesis. It walks the reader through what exists, what is missing, and sets up the justification for your own work. Also remember, Scoping reviews are iterative. You don't have to get everything perfect in the first round. It's absolutely normal to refine your research terms halfway, adjust your inclusion criteria, realize halfway through that one cluster of literature is dominating. That's not failure, that's methodological flexibility. And in a scoping review, it is not just allowed, it is expected. A good scoping review doesn't just list what is out there, it tells the story of where the field is now and where it still needs to go. And that's a wrap for today's video. If your brain feels overwhelmed, a scoping review is your relief map. It won't give you final answers, but it will fill the blank spaces where your research can shine. If you missed the previous episodes on narrative or systematic review, the links are in the description or hit the I button at the top right. In the next episode, we are diving into integrative reviews, the perfect choice when your topic includes both qualitative and quantitative sources. Until then, keep exploring and let your research questions grow smarter with every step. See you soon.